Okay, welcome to Friday afternoon 4:30 webinar. This week's webinar is basically going over the last blog, which was the two faces of 5G. We wrote that blog because we just felt that the telcos weren't being all that clear as to the fact that there were two different types of 5G, and that was confusing a lot of people. In our previous webinars and previous blogs, we've covered the 5G streetlights, and we covered the dangers of streetlights and how it creates a geomagnetic field in the Earth's crust, which creates a radiation charge that comes out of the ground. And that radiation charge, when it gets to a building, fully engulfs the building. That type of radiation in a building is what keeps people sick. I've been a building biologist for 20 years, and there are other types of radiation that do the same thing. And whenever I encounter that in my consultancy work, there is either physical stress going on in the way of illnesses and/or emotional problems going on. A building filled with charge that charge has a positive charge and has a detrimental effect on our meridians, then our organs. That's what we call EMF stress. It's interesting that a lot of people out there talk about EMF but don't know the basic fundamentals. That is, it has an effect on our meridians and then our organs and whatever's going on in the body from there. Those things can be exacerbated or other issues can come up. Okay, so the two types of 5G. Recently, and this all came around also too, because we're always doing research on 5G, and recently I thought, how about it's time to buy a 5G phone? So I contacted Optus, who look after me with my phones, and said, okay, can I have a 5G phone? And by the way, where can I use it? And the Optus person I was dealing with, our account manager, emailed me a map which showed the 5G coverage in around what I focused on really was the Mornington Peninsula, where we live area. I was a little bit surprised that this 5G map showed a lot of 5G coverage in our area, and we don't have any 5G streetlights enabled set up on the Mornington Peninsula whatsoever. That 5G streetlight setup, which is the dangerous 5G which we've been talking about, is mainly in other cities around Australia than Melbourne. I don't know why. So, for example, Perth, Adelaide, Sydney, Brisbane have got a lot of 5G streetlights set up in the suburbs, and that's the dangerous one we're talking about. So I got emailed this map which showed the 5G coverage, which was not a 5G streetlight coverage map. It was for the 5G mobile phone coverage map, which was really interesting. I wasn't really aware of that. So I'll share the screen with that map. And this is the moving map. It's a little bit clunky and hard to use. But over on the left here, you can nominate which service you want. 4G, 3G, 5G, which is for mobile phones only, and 5G home. And this is what really surprised me, is that the 5G home broadband is actually available for use with the 5G coverage which is coming from the mobile phone towers. And that was not something that was made clear by any of the telcos. Everyone was talking about the 5G streetlight setup. So this sort of confused me a little bit. And so I went a little bit deeper into this whole 5G setup with Optus, and wherever I move the cursor, moves. Let's get this right first. Okay. If I move this around, Wherever I put the cursor, it'll show me that this shows coverage of Optus 5G network for mobile and home servers, but doesn't include indoor coverage, which I'm sort of wondering what's going on here. If I nominate a particular street in this area, which is highlighted pink on the Optus website, which is a little bit clunky to navigate anyway, what I find is that with some street addresses, it says, yes, I'm actually eligible to use 5G home broadband. Other addresses I've put in say, no, even though it's in the pink area, that it's not available. So I don't know what's going on there. So let's explain that 5G scenario there. As you can see, if I move outwards, these aren't just designated to suburbs delineated by major roads like the streetlight setup, which is the dangerous 5G. This is coming from the 4G towers that have the 5G panels on them. There is a website that does talk about 5G and mobile phone towers, but that website's information doesn't always correlate with what's going on here, so it's a little bit confusing. So here it's coming from mobile phone towers, and if we just go over some basics of mobile phone towers in my language, I'll leave that up there, what the hell. In my language is that a mobile phone tower is harmful for up to 50, maybe 80 metres away from the tower all the way around. And it's harmful because the tower creates a geomagnetic field that extends out 50 to 80 metres around the tower. And the geomagnetic field creates a radiation charge coming up out of the ground, about a metre out of the ground. And the danger there is if you put a house or a building within that geomagnetic field zone, what you're going to have is a situation the same as when we have the 5G streetlight setup, where the building's going to be full of charge. But not all mobile phone towers, some are, some aren't, are discreetly placed in areas where there's no housing or building within 50 to 80 metres. In a lot of the places, like in shopping centres, there's one tower down the road from us in Mount Eliza, which is 5G enabled, I think, for Telstra, not Optus. The shopping centre area is affected because the tower is right next door. However, shopping centres are commercial buildings, and we've spoken about how in the past that commercial buildings have the same type of radiation as if you've got 5G anyway. But beyond that 80 metres, in this pink zone, you don't have that geomagnetic charge coming out, field or the charge coming out of the ground caused by 5G. It can be associated with other scenarios of things going on in the building, or as in whether it be a commercial industrial building, or if there's been a death on the land, which creates bioplasmic radiation, which also generates a geomagnetic field up to the boundaries of the property that the death has occurred in. It sounds strange why to the boundaries, but that's just the way it is. So this type of 5G we're talking about here isn't the 5G that all the scientists have been talking about, where they're talking about how dangerous it is. They're talking about the 5G streetlight setup. I know going back over 12 months, probably 14, 16 months, there was a city in the UK, Gateshead, which had 5G streetlight set up, and that gained a lot of coverage around the world, or coverage, attention around the world. And there were a lot of people complaining of health issues, which they blamed on the 5G streetlight setup. Probably true. However, a city like Gateshead had some very old houses, and some areas was very old, and there also would have been attributed to that would have been bioplasmic radiation also. And a lot of data or research was done in that city and then other cities around the world where the streetlight setup had occurred. I noticed recently that talk about 5G in the media or Facebook, if you were not careful, if you said the wrong thing, you get censored. And we're being very careful what we say, and we try to lay our cards down fairly and say, okay, we're not fear-mongering, but we're just giving some of the facts from our point of view. And about a month ago, there was a lot of stuff about 5G in the media, on the internet especially, which was saying, oh, hey, you know, all these scientists are saying that no, it's actually safe, and what's everyone talk about, and go away and be quiet and move on with your life, you know, move on people type of thing. And with this understanding now that, okay, there's two types of 5G, one from tower, one from streetlights. Maybe they were talking about the 5G from the towers, because I agree with them. If you're too close to the tower and you don't want to be too close to any mobile phone tower, you've got issues. If you're away from the tower, you're going to have a wave. And this is an interesting one too, because I know some building biologists who will swear black and blue that if you have a radio frequency wave, that's going to cause electromagnetic stress in the body. However, there are some alternative health modalities around which will say, no, that the wave is actually harmless because it has no charge. You need charge to actually cause electromagnetic stress in the body. And it's interesting how there's a division where the people running around using the EMF meters are blindly believing that the meter says is going to equate to illness or whatever going on with our health and well-being if you have that type of reading. But I know myself, and I've got my own radio frequency meters, that I've been in areas where radio frequency meters will say that there's very high radiation. And when we've done the tests, there's actually nothing strong enough to cause meridian or organ stress there anyway, which is, you know, quite an interesting one. So that may explain what they're coming from, but as I said, because of the 5G connection to the COVID-19 and what happened in Wuhan, and here's another really interesting aspect regarding that too. Which type of 5G did they have in Wuhan? Was it in the streetlights or was it for mobile phones? I haven't found anything anywhere to say which one it was, and my guess it was the towers, not the 5G streetlights. And I've always been saying, you know, Wuhan and it's all of China, the bioplasmic charge in the air is so strong that when they turn 5G on in Wuhan, they weren't going, oh, can't you feel the radiation? They wouldn't have. They just would have gone, oh, beauty, my 5G phone is now working, because the bioplasmic charge in the air from whatever else was going on in Wuhan would have been worse than the 5G if it was streetlights and one doesn't piggyback on top of the other. You sort of have one or the other. Although, next 2 weeks, in 2 weeks' time, our next webinar is actually going to be on the fact that we are in Mercury retrograde at the moment, and this is a really good time because over the next 2 weeks, every day, I'll be monitoring the geomagnetic field effect on the Earth's crust from the different aspects of Mercury in retrograde. And I can tell you now, when Mercury in retrograde gets really bad, so to speak, the charge that comes up out of the ground can be double that of what 5G will do. In a sense, it could be worse than 5G, and it's not just in an area, it'll be worldwide. But I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much. That'll be in 2 weeks' time, and that'll be really interesting. So yeah, in Wuhan, there were so many other things going on that the 5G wouldn't have had any compounding effect whatsoever. And as I said, I guess it was the phones rather than the broadband. Okay, I think I've got some questions coming in. No, that's not questions, it's something else. Okay, if you've got any questions, for sure, everyone who's logged in, you can actually send me your questions. I'll just check there's nothing there yet. Okay. Just getting back to our little map of which I was showing before, which was kindly sent to me by Optus. I did actually find one address in that pink zone where I went online to the Optus website and put an address in to see if it allowed me to if it allowed me to ask the question whether 5G broadband was available, and I put a number of addresses in. I only got one that came up that said 5G home broadband was available, so maybe we went something new. However, I haven't seen or experienced a 5G broadband modems yet, because where we live here and the general area around us is only for 5G phones. I've tried a few addresses and they won't come up allowing you to apply for 5G broadband. Which, what I'm getting to here is, we know a Wi-Fi router creates a radiation field around it, and that extends out to about 2 meters. That's how far the charge field is, and a Wi-Fi router is only harmful when someone's on the internet. I keep on saying I wish I had $1 for the amount of people who say to me, I'd turn my router off or the modem off every night, and there's no need to if there's no one on the internet, because the modem is not active. When someone's on the internet, the modem becomes active and creates a radiation field around up to about 1.5 meters. And if you put yourself within that field, you're going to be under quite a lot of electromagnetic stress. I know some reasonably, but not very sensitive, not overly sensitive people who have experienced some little shocks, so to speak, when they turn their modem on, which has been right next to their computer, and they sit down and they go, oh my God, I'm really overwhelmed by something, without thinking it's actually the modem, which is right next to the computer. So I haven't experienced a 5G modem yet, and I can't wait to do that. And over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to try and endeavour to get my hands into an area where I can experience it. I think the 5G modems need to be looked at in a different light to the 4G modems. We don't know how much bigger that field will be, or whether it be the same or whatever. But we'll get to that in the near future, so I can then clarify it for people. Okay, I've just got an interesting question coming. I might leave that a little bit, but I will come back to it. I've got 2 questions actually. No, I'll go with them now because it might start to compound. So, here's actually a question from someone which wanting to know what devices can we use to provide protection for ourselves and our homes from EMF, and we know that that's the Geofence or the Stellar Dome. They're 2 really great products. Everyone knows what Geofence looks like, and everyone knows what the Stellar Dome looks like. Another question from Sonia. Can you leave a Geofence plugged in building for a short time, then take it out, and does it keep the building clear of bypassing energies? That's a really interesting question. I'll answer that now, even though it digresses from the 5G talk. In a house, if you've got bioplasmic radiation, you plug a Geofence in, say for a couple of minutes, then take it away, the bioplasmic will disappear. If the house was being used as a business, it attracts a different type of bioplasmic radiation, and when you take the Geofence out, that bioplasmic radiation will come straight back. That's something we've been, over the last few months, doing some experimenting in. We've got one building in, let's say, call it Mornington. It's a house. It's a business that once every couple of weeks we attend, and every time we get to that building, we read the radiation from outside and go, wow, this place is really, really bad. When we go into the building, we have our Stellar Dome, the bioplasmic radiation is cleared, and we go out of the building and drive away, and we look back and read the energy again, it's gone back to what it was because it was being used as a commercial property. And all commercial properties have this same strange, I wouldn't call it phenomenon, but thing going on. We've noticed that a lot. There's another building we go into, Frankston, which is a commercial building that has offices in it and all types of different businesses in there. There's a lawyer, there's an accountant, there's a chiropractor, that's why we go. And every time we go into that building beforehand, we notice that the radiation is really, really toxic. We're in there with our Stellar Dome, and it clears it. When we walk away from the building, everything goes back to what it was. So to answer that question, it depends on whether really the building's being used as a commercial building or whether it's not being used as a commercial building. But that's a really important, that's a really good question. So I like that one, because that's just part of what our awareness, like what we, when we're out and about, we're always not so much working, but we're always aware of things. Because we're always looking, or maybe for content for webinars, but it's part of just keeping an eye on what's actually going on around us. I've got another little person over here who keeps on throwing questions under my nose in yellow post-it notes. Which one is more dangerous, 5G phone tower or streetlights? I explained that one before. It's the streetlight setup that we have to really be aware of. I've noticed over the last couple of weeks I've been doing more readings, which are the Google Earth readings, which we offer free in Adelaide and Perth especially, and I'm finding more and more areas where there is actually 5G setup. Here's another question from Michael and Brody asking, will the older geoclinics work with 5G and the older dome? Yes, it will. We've tested our older geoclinics against 5G and not a problem. Just that the older geoclinics don't handle the high solar wind radiation and the radiation which is caused by the Mercury in retrograde. They go back about 4 years. 4 years ago, we changed those programs. So anything older than 4 years doesn't have that aspect. Anything newer does, but anything older than 4 years is still good for 5G. Another question from Martine: does the geoclinics protect from the street cell 5G? That's what actually put it. Yes, it does, and that's why we went to Canberra last year to do the testing. Before we put anything on the internet, we want to make sure that we're saying is correct, because there are people out there and authorities who want to jump all over anyone who makes a claim and can't back it up, and we wanted to make damn sure. Plus, we wanted to really experience and get in the 5G zone and really feel it. Even though we feel it, we don't allow it to bother us, so to speak. Like, I enjoy reading and being immersed in really toxic houses and buildings, because I'm always wanting to know how it's affecting me and how it's affecting my meridians and other people around me. Okay, let's move on. I've just got to going to show you, I'll share the screen again with if I can just get everything to work properly. Okay. I just want to remind people about this photo, which is on the blog, and it's part of the equipment to look out for when you have 5G streetlights like this. You've got people to be vigilant and to look at our streetlights, which just sounds like a really silly thing to do. When I started doing it over 12 months ago, a few people said to me, what are you looking at? What are you looking at these streetlights all the time? Because I was studying to see what was actually going on, what the equipment was. If you've got this on your streetlights, then it's an indication that you have got 5G in the area, because besides the LED streetlights being part of the equipment, this is also part of it. If you don't see this, what's on the screen now, then you don't have the 5G streetlights setup going on. I had this question from someone on the peninsula recently who lived in Tyob, which is down on Mornington Peninsula, where the 5G streetlights are, and everyone was aware of them, and then there was a bit of panic going on where, oh boy, are we being irradiated or what's going on? Because they could visibly, clearly see that every streetlight in their area had the blue microcell antenna hanging down. But none of this equipment was installed. The other equipment to get it actually up and running is installed. We don't know when either. We've asked the council, and then all we get is got no idea. I've asked Telstra and Optus, and they're saying we've got no idea. The reason I'm asking is that our factory where we are in Somerville is in the same area, and we've got the streetlights there, and we can't wait for them to turn them on, and then maybe we might get good broadband if Telstra is listening to this. Okay, another question. Okay, here's another question. Sorry for being a little bit disjointed today, but the questions that come in are really, really, really good. What about the 500 satellites? So that's a really interesting one. A lot of people have been asking me about the satellites, and I'm trying to do a little bit of research, and I sort of can't work out what's going on. But all I will say is that how many of you can remember back 10, I think 10, 12 years ago, when we had the CDMA mobile phones, and they were really popular in the country areas with called Country People, where there was, I think back then it was actually only 3G, 4G hadn't come out, where the CDMA phones, I think they were a satellite type of setup phone, don't get me wrong there, and no matter where they were, they could get reception, and the farmers and the contractors in the country areas absolutely loved them. And they came along and they took that system away. I think the military got it. They wanted it from the souls. Well, good on them, they can have it. And without sounding ignorant, I would say that the satellites will be there so that we can use our 5G phones. I don't know about broadband or anything like that in any remote area. Like in the beginning, what they were saying about 5G was that, hey, you know, this is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And who said sliced bread's a good thing anyway? And no matter where you go, you'll get coverage, which means if you're going to be a little bit of the conspiracy theorists, and we're right into that these days with what's going on, you know, for sure they want to know where everyone is. We know of a little app out there that some people like us to have, which means that they can track where we're being and going in relation to who we're with, who's got good health or not, and listening and reading to other people around the world. That app might be so to make sure that you're not within 1.5 metres distance of someone else, or to make sure that maybe the 1.5 metre distancing is to make sure that you're not too close to someone else, so the whatever it is can actually find you, and that might be connected to our 500 satellites. That's a really interesting one. Like, I can't find any more information out there. And I've asked the telcos about it, and they just go, well, we've got no idea. And they act as if we're telling them something new that that they didn't know, that they should know, which is really, really, really silly. Okay, I've got another question here. Is there a difference between green and purple colour? I don't know what it really refers to. We make our Geofence and Stellar in green. We're coming out with a new colour Stellar soon, which is a little project on the side, but I won't announce it yet, but it doesn't replace the green one. We have made purple Stellar, but we couldn't find them as being as effective as the green ones, but they still were very, very good. If you're talking pendants in our organ pendant range, the purple is for the spleen meridian. The green is for the liver meridian, if you're talking about that. Okay, some more questions. I'll keep on going through them. 5:02, we'll go till 5:15. This webinar will be edited and it will end up on our website. There's already a few of the past webinars up, so don't panic, people, if you have to go out, leave the webinar early or do something, or if you know someone who wanted to watch it and couldn't, everything will be edited and tidied up and eventually on the website. Here's a really interesting question. Would the satellites disturb the protective energy layer around the Earth? Well, the Earth's magnetic field is weakened at the moment. We have what I think called solar minimum. I don't think the satellites would be able to do that, because if the satellite's going to work, like say, let's say a GPS satellite, and a GPS device does, when you are using it, there is an energy beam that does go upwards. I spoke about that a long, long, long time ago. No one seemed to really worry about it. A GPS unit in a car doesn't create a big radiation field around it anyway. The car's a bigger problem there. So if these satellites are working, so like a GPS or CDMA, it would only be a beam coming down to the phone. But the phone itself, and we all know that mobile phones are an energetic hazard to human beings anyway. They have their own issues going on, regardless of whether they're turned on or off, whether the beam's going upwards or the beam's going back to the tower. That would be an interesting one. So I don't think so, but we'll just wait and see as to when they are going to be turned on. Okay. So the effects of the streetlights, the other effects of the streetlights, which was the activation of the other Earth magnetic grid lines, which run north, south, east, west at 70 metres apart. The 5G coming from the towers 80 metres beyond the tower, beyond that. So if you're a kilometre away, the tower 5G is not going to activate that grid. However, if you've got other things going on in the property, or if it's commercial property, that other really dangerous Earth magnetic grid is actually going to be activated. So there's, as I said, with the 5G, with the towers, you would be irresponsible to say they're safe, because any type of communication equipment, if you get too close to it, is going to be a problem. However, if you compare that to the streetlight setup, for what we experience and what we are experiencing when I'm doing Google Earth readings in some of these other cities around Australia, they are the danger. And if you're going to talk also, someone also had a question the other day to me while I was on the phone talking to them. They were asking about some countries in Europe and worried about, because they were actually going to travel to Europe, I think they're going to be living in Europe, and they were worried about the 5G in those areas because they were, I think, talking about 5G streetlight zones. A lot of Europe has a bioplasmic charge which covers it, like China. China, I'm not just picking on China. China, it's something that goes on there. It does happen in other countries around the world, depending on the history of how the people are being treated, really, so to speak. I've spoken often in the past about the bioplasmic charge in the air in New Zealand, and talking to New Zealanders, they all tell of the violent history of the Maoris from I don't know how long ago, and the energy in New Zealand has a feeling of death and depression. Those types of emotions are in that energy field that covers all of New Zealand. Interesting thing with New Zealand though is if you put a geofence or a stellar dome into a property there, it clears the bioplasmic charge, and if you take it away, there's a hole left in the bioplasmic charge where the property is, and it wouldn't come back unless something else happens untoward. The same thing actually goes for Japan. Last year I had a client in Japan who was worried about, and they lived in, I think it was Hiroshima, and worried about the latent radiation, what's left over from what happened at the end of the Second World War. And they had a geocleanse and were able to track the house down with Google Earth and found that the geocleanse neutralised an imprint either from what happened or the emotional state of the people after the nuclear blast. And we got that person in Japan to take the geocleanse out of the wall, and a hole in the bioplasmic in the area had been created, as in when the geocleanse came out, the bioplasmic charge didn't come back. That was obviously not a commercial building, because if it was a commercial building, the charge would have come back. Okay, we're getting to the end now. As I said, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be talking about what will have transpired over the next 2 weeks. I'll be watching every day with the different aspects of the Mercury retrograde. If you just be patient for a second, I'll even pull up the website that we go to, which shows the Mercury retrograde, and I'll share the screen now, because this might be really valuable to a lot of people. Okay, this is a website. We just stumbled across this a couple of years ago when we were concerned or wanting to know with what was going on with the retrogrades. And this is the website, and it shows the stages. It's a great website. We love it. It shows on the right-hand side the stages and what actually happens. And there was our February retrograde and March retrograde. Interesting how in March we were in retrograde, and March is when they announced the COVID lockdowns in Australia. Good on you guys. Here's June, and it started on the 2nd of June. It started on the 2nd of June. And the first stage is the weaker, then get stronger. And what date are we today? We're the 12th. Tomorrow, the next 3-4 days will be really, really interesting, very much. Then we go into direct station. Towards the end, I don't know how we're going, where we're going. The phase, we're at pre-shadow now, we're about to go into retrograde phase. Then after that, we'll go post-shadow phase. Okay, that's how it works. So this, from tomorrow to the next week and a half, from 2 weeks, it's going to be really interesting. 17th and 18th, probably maybe the 2 days where the geomagnetic field radiation and how far that charge comes out of the ground, that may triple what 5G in streetlight areas will be. As I said, next in 2 weeks' time, 4:30 again, we'll stop boring everyone with talking about 5G over and over and over again, and we'll get something different. You have to be aware these days. You have to really know what's going on in your environment around you. That's why later on this year we will be running some one-day introduction to intuitive building biology courses. We'll start them in Melbourne, and anyone can do them. And they're a great course because it makes you aware of your environment, what's going on around you, and that can be fun. Like, not everything is bad. If you're aware, everywhere you go becomes a little excursion where you're investigating what's going on where and what's safe energetically to go into, and what's a real danger, and why it could may have had a certain effect on certain people in certain ways. So thanks very much for attending. I've just got one last thing came in. Someone just saying, just attended the 5G summit, in Arthur Fristenberg, who wrote, an invisible rainbow is extremely concentrated by the harmful effects of satellite. I still don't reckon that's true. Without knocking anyone, there's a lot of armchair experts out there, and they call themselves scientists and all sorts of names, and really aren't really qualified to give an opinion because we just don't know yet. Like, there's another webinar I saw coming up recently with a panel of people, which when I went through, that panel of people wouldn't know radiation if it hit them on the head. So interesting. Okay, thanks for attending, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.